Won't you give me your love? Give me your love.
Greetings y'all, the name's JUNA.R.J and it's been a while since I last made a video after a whole month of a lockdown and movie theaters closure, and the fact that I have to fix my computer, and also the fact that movie theaters are now back, and now it's finally back, it's open, and I went to see 3 movies in IMAX, and I thought I wanted to review them all in one video. And not only that I'm going to review the movie in general about my thoughts and all that and all the flaws and all that, but I thought since I learned cinematography in this semester's college, and I thought I wanted to explore the movie through cinematography, especially with IMAX camera, because the 3 movies has the same technology in common, and that's IMAX, which I've seen IMAX, I loved IMAX, I've seen 18 movies in IMAX back in 2017, and I just saw the first 3 movies in IMAX, and they were all shot with IMAX cameras, and I wanted to discuss that in this review. So let's get started with our first review. Our first movie is going to be Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I love that movie. I think this is one of my favorite Marvel movies for now, after movies like Black Panther and the Spider-Man series, and as well as the Avengers movies. They're all great, and Captain America Civil War. I mean, all the Marvel movies are all great, but Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is a big surprise, and I loved it. I love the usage of culture, especially with Asian culture, and this movie really brings a lot. It really pays homage to Asian people like me in general. And not only that, they tackle with the Asian culture really well, but they tackle with the storyline really well. The story is really different compared to other Marvel movies we get these days, and the story, the dynamic between Shang-Chi and his father Wenwu, I thought it was also great. It was also emotional, and I thought the final battle in the ancient village, I guess the mood color, it's very calming compared to Age of Ultron, and that's what I can say about Shang-Chi. I love the usage of music, I love the action in this movie. Wong versus Abomination is great, but the best part of seeing this movie is when I get to see this movie in IMAX. Back when Avengers Endgame and Infinity War was a thing, it was revealed that the whole film was filmed with IMAX cameras, compared to the Phase 3 movies where select sequences uses IMAX cameras for their footage. But for this one, the whole movie was filmed with IMAX cameras, and that's great, and you get to see the whole picture in IMAX, and I just loved it. It never gets bored. I couldn't get my eyes off it. I love to see the great battle sequence in this movie. For instance, between the introduction between Wenwu and Shang-Chi's mother, and basically the battle between Wong and Abomination, and as well the battle outside the skyscraper building. I thought it's beautiful, it's magnificent, it's very pleasurable to see this movie in IMAX. And this is the other Marvel movies aside of Avengers movies that was filmed entirely in IMAX and seen in IMAX. My only wish was that more Marvel movies could be filmed like this, especially maybe with movies like Eternals or Spider-Man No Way Home, hopefully. But seeing Shang-Chi in IMAX, it's pleasurable, it's enjoyable, and I wish that Marvel gets to release their IMAX footage for these Marvel movies that they filmed in IMAX. I'm gonna say seeing Shang-Chi in IMAX is worth the big screen. I just loved it. I enjoyed the whole movie in IMAX. Even the post-credits was also filmed in IMAX, so that's great. And I just wish that more Marvel movies could use IMAX cameras for their movies, which I'm sure they do. On to our next movie, No Time to Die. This is the finale, the final James Bond movie starring Daniel Craig, sad face. And this is the finale that I was not expecting from a James Bond movie. And after a year of watching all the James Bond movies, this movie is different than any of the James Bond films, especially the Daniel Craig movies in common. One thing about the Daniel Craig movies in common is that Daniel Craig's take on James Bond is very serious, and as for the finale, it still has that serious act as well, but this one tries to be very emotional and tries to end the movie in a different dynamic the way it can be. Now, as a James Bond fan, I could talk about many things. When I was watching the James Bond movie, towards the opening, when we get to the gun barrel, I say to myself, oh my god, it's really a James Bond movie. I'm saying to myself, and especially, there were throwbacks to previous James Bond movies that were outside the Daniel Craig franchises, even from Sean Connery or Roger Moore, and even one of my favorite movies, which I say to myself, I say those words to myself when they say it on the big screen in this James Bond movie, and I was very happy about it. And one thing you should remember is that when it comes to No Time to Die, it still connects with the previous James Bond movie. We're still in the aftermath of Spectre. We're still moving on from Casino Royale and other events from the previous film. But No Time to Die just concludes that in a very emotional way. And essentially there was not much of the action in the movies. I mean, the action were very enjoyable, especially the action in Italy when Bond was on a bike and was also on a car chase sequence. And especially the sequence when they were in the party with Ana de Armas. Yes, those sequences were enjoyable. And those were the only sequence that was filmed in IMAX, unfortunately. So when I was watching this movie in IMAX, it felt like watching Wonder Woman 1984. After the gun barrel, the first film would just get into the IMAX sequence, and I was very surprised about it. I was like, oh god, we're into the IMAX sequence. And after the Bond opening, after the Billie Eilish opening theme, and then we just moved back to scope. I mean, of course, the James Bond movie as a whole, No Time to Die, it's a beautiful ending. It has all it's got to end the movie. There's no choice but they have to end this movie in this way, especially with the emotional ending and the finale with a heartbreaking moment. Some of the action sequences are great, but the IMAX sequence, there was not much to it. And I really wish for some of the IMAX sequence, they could just shot more. Especially like the finale that gave me the Sean Connery vibe, that could have been filmed in IMAX. And especially the scene in the forest, which I thought was also beautiful, which I thought was also enjoyable. That could have been filmed in IMAX as well. Especially the same location from the opening. If we were back there, we could just film that in IMAX as well. Why did we do that? Well, I guess it was because IMAX had to share cameras for other film projects like Tenet or maybe Wonder Woman 1984 and the Marvel movies. And I guess they didn't have time, but it was their only effort for using IMAX cameras. And I was very happy that they were able to use IMAX cameras for this movie in general, especially for a finale. Therefore, this is what I'm going to say about No Time to Die. I'm going to say No Time to Die is a wonderful 007 movie that's worth seeing in IMAX. It's a beautiful movie, I would say. It's a beautiful finale. I cried at the inside, unfortunately, but it's still a great James Bond movie. I mean, compared to Casino Royale and Skyfall, this one goes on the third on the list in between Skyfall and Casino Royale. The recent movie I just watched in IMAX was Dune, and this movie came up a week before the US release, which means this movie will be released later on HBO Max, and I have a lot to say about Dune. I was mindless when I watched this movie. I came in walking this movie with no knowledge at all about Dune, only knowing that, hey, I'm just gonna watch Dune in IMAX, and knowing that there are these wonderful cast. They got Rebecca Ferguson, Timothée Chalamet, Josh Brolin, Oscar Isaac, Dave Bautista, Stellan Skarsgård, David Dashiellman, Zendaya, Javier Bardem. Yeah, that's basically all. That's basically a wonderful cast, and I've been seeing them for like the rest of the movie. We basically just focus on them. I'm really mindless watching this dude. This was really a long movie. I mean, this movie is 2 hours and 35 minutes, but there could have been more that could have been explained within those runtime. I think that's because the book was very long, so they had to like split into 2 parts. I'm sorry if I have to spoil this, but it felt like watching Deadly Hallows Part 1. Only this time, the whole story was not being able to be explored. Maybe in like the sequel. And for those of you who are Zendaya fans, who because you love Zendaya because she's in great movies and she was in the Spider-Man movies with Tom Holland and they're currently dating and all that, you don't get Zendaya until like the third act of the film, unfortunately. And essentially, we just focus more on Timothée Chalamet and we focus on Rebecca Ferguson in the second act. And by the first act, we're more onto Timothée Chalamet with the family, like Josh Brolin, Jason Momoa, and Oscar Isaac, and that's about it. But there was also, but the thing about me that I loved about IMAX, which really confused me, especially with editing, is that the IMAX sequence was on the dream sequence of this movie. So in this movie, Paul, played by Timothée Chalamet, he has this dream sequence. He has this dreams of Zendaya and the people and the war, and those were filmed with IMAX cameras. But unfortunately, when you're watching this in IMAX, you start seeing this in scope, and then in IMAX, and then scope, and then IMAX. Like, the only sequence that was filmed in IMAX was the dream sequence. And there were some of the great battle sequences that we could have seen in the third act, like Timothée Chalamet with Zendaya, and basically a battle scene with Timothée Chalamet. That could have been put in the end of the film. But since this is a 2-part film, we didn't get much of that. We just randomly put that IMAX sequence in the middle of the movie. And unfortunately, I did fall asleep. Like, I try not to fall asleep in the middle of the third act. All I remember is just, you know, Timothée Chalamet meeting with Zendaya, and then that's it. That's just the end of the movie, unfortunately. And there was more. There were some great moments that I seen in IMAX. The Sandworm was great, and there was this night battle in this movie in like the second act, I believe. Like apparently the house of Stellan Skarsgård's character started attacking Paul's house, and that sequence was filmed in IMAX, and it's very beautiful. Not to mention the DP of this movie was the guy who did my favorite film, who will also be working with the director of my favorite film for the Batman. So I get that this movie is much with Rogue One. It's very similar to Rogue One. I get he did Rogue One, and now 5 years later I'm seeing him doing Dune. Look, if there's any other sci-fi film that uses IMAX camera aside of Dune that I could relate to, it's probably Tron Legacy, if not Blade Runner 2049, because that movie was also filmed in IMAX. Roger Deakins won an Oscar for it, and we learned that in film school because of the cinematography, the color palette, basically the basics between the medium shot and the close-up shots. I sort of pay attention to that when I was watching this movie, and I thought that was used very well. well. So I would see this movie as a beautiful art movie rather than like an action movie. So don't go into this movie expecting that you're gonna get many actions, because you don't. It's basically like Deathly Hallows Part 1. That's what I would say it. So we'll just have to see what the sequel have to offer, because essentially Warner Bros. Didn't do much with the marketing. That was until they decided to release this movie on HBO Max, which I'm gonna have to rewatch, especially for the third act, which I'll see again, and I hope they can give me the IMAX shot, especially with Wonder Woman 1984 and the Suicide Squad. I'm gonna say Dune is a movie with a beautiful view in IMAX. That's what I said back on Instagram. Because when I walked out of IMAX, when I walked out watching Dune, I said to myself, what did I just watch? Like, what was that? When the movie was about to end, I said to myself, no, don't end the movie, don't end the movie, and then the movie just end. I'm not saying that I hate Dune, but I just felt like Dune is misleading for me, or I'm just being misleaded with what Dune was supposed to look like. But since this is a very big movie, it's a very big movie with a very big screen, and the fact that the story is very long, I guess that Warner Bros. Will have to take its time, especially with Dennis knowing what to do with this movie. But yeah, those are all the movies I've seen in IMAX. Other movies I'll see in IMAX includes Eternals, Spider-Man No Way Home, Venom Let There Be Carnage, if we'll ever get to see that, because Sony's not telling me when this movie's coming out in Indonesia, and especially The Kingsman. And those were all the movies I've seen in IMAX. Let me know what movies have you seen in IMAX. I want to hear about your opinion in the comments below. And then goes all my reviews on the movies that I've seen in IMAX. Here's the outro. That is all for this video. If you do enjoy this video, give it a like. That would be very helpful. And in the description, you'll find 2 links so you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Google+. I appreciate you guys for watching this, and I'll see you another time. Bye-bye.